Staying on court stories, the 12th witness in the court case of televangelist Timothy Omotoso continues with her testimony at the High Court in Gqeberha today. Vuyiseka Nontlazi gave details of the various sexual violation incidents she allegedly endured at the hands of Omotoso. Nontlazi told the court that these incidents occurred at Omotoso's house in Durban and continued when they travelled abroad. Omotoso and his co-accused are facing a total of 62 charges ranging from rape, sexual assault and human trafficking to racketeering. Reporter Lerato Fekisi has more for us.
Vuyiseka Nontlazi, the 12th witness in the Timothy Omotoso case, has continued her testimony in court this morning. This morning, she was really giving a brief overview of her stay in the famous, notorious Durban mansion, where she mentioned that it was Pastor Omotoso who had asked her to actually move in with him in Durban. When she arrived there, she says that she stayed in a house in Umhlanga in Westridge with about 20 girls, and Omotoso in the same house had a room upstairs but also had his own separate apartment in a complex. She said that the alleged sexual offences continued daily. It became a normal thing that within the house she would be called after a service by the general secretary of the church, told to go to his room every time after a service, where he would allegedly perform sexual acts on her. The first sexual act, she explained that he forced her face into his sexual organs, where she was told to perform oral sex on him, and she did that, and after that she was told to clean and then go and perform at a service. She then went on to explain how after that specific time in Durban there was a crusade in Port Elizabeth, where Omotoso came down to Port Elizabeth and then began forming a church group called the Grace Galaxy group that Vuyiseka and some other girls were part of. That group then became the stars and the singing choir of the church, who would perform every time there was a church crusade. She then went on to speak about her first international trip she took with Pastor Omotoso to Nigeria with the singing group, where during a time at the dining hall he called all three girls who were part of the group now, and she indicated that at that time Cheryl Zondi was also part of this group called Grace Galaxy, a singing group as part of the church. And he began telling them about his country, Nigeria, and also said to them, can you see how privileged you are, that under any other circumstances you wouldn't be exposed to such a life. I'm taking you guys on international trips, I'm giving you guys money for uniforms and clothes, stuff that you'd never would get if you guys didn't obey me. And she said that that time she realized how much power she had over him and how privileged they were that they were getting exposure to international trips because of the life Omotoso had allegedly created for them. She then went back to explain that after that trip they went back to Durban again, and business continued as usual, and yet every night again she was told after evening service by the general secretary of the church to go and wash. She was told then to go to his room, and yet again, and she even went as far as saying that these sexual offences happened every single evening while she stayed at the house. Then she went to speak about a trip that the congregation, also Grace Galaxy, took to Israel, where yet again Omotoso would sit down with the girls and tell them about the opulent life he has given them, the privilege they have to be exposed to such a life, and how lucky they are to be within his close circle, and how lucky they are to be called his girls, and what disobeying him would do to them. She said then she interpreted this that he was trying to really justify the alleged rape that she said she had got in his hands, and she felt that he was just trying to really water down what such a terrible incident. She then spoke back about her time back in Durban, where she began to realize that perhaps it was not only her who was actually getting sexually violated, because on specific nights she will see Cheryl Zondi being called by General Secretary, told to wash and also go to his room, and she began to realize that perhaps she wasn't the only one who was being sexually violated. Towards the end of her testimony, she spoke about how when she was back in Durban, she fell ill. She went to hospital that Omotoso paid for, and she was diagnosed with tuberculosis, and she told the pastor she wants to go home because she's not feeling well. She went back home, recovered, and then went back to Durban. And then when she got back, she found Omotoso not really the same towards her. He was hostile. He was calling her jealous and cheeky and disobedient and calling her all types of names. He once called her to a bedroom and chastised her, telling her that she's no longer pretty, she's ugly, and she's very dishonest and treating the girls very badly. And she felt very uncomfortable around him and the church, because before they had, it was still control, but when she got back the second time to Durban, she found him very different, and she was no longer being called to his bedroom for those one-on-one sexual offences she alleges. But now he was very grumpy, very hostile towards her, so much so on one night when he called all the girls together, he actually asked them, what is it that you want? And she was scared and she was very anxious, but she spoke out and said, I actually want to go home. And then at that time, he took 500 rand, threw it on the floor and said, if you want to go home, get out of my house and then leave. And even went as far as telling the secretary, can you see how ungrateful these girls are? I've given them such a life and now they want to leave me. She took the money, they went to a night vigil, and during the night vigil, which obviously is a cross-night experience, a church experience, they took the money, packed their bags quickly to pack their bags, herself and these other girls was part of the singing group too, and they decided to go on a bus and head back home. At about 5 o'clock, the bus was only going to leave that evening. They stayed the entire time at the bus station. Just as about the bus was about to leave, accused number 2, Ulusanda Sito, actually arrived at the bus station and told them that Omotoso was calling them back and they must immediately take their bags and go back to the hotel room. And that's where we ended the testimony. So that's what we heard this morning. Vuyiseka Nontlazi just relating her terrible ordeal under the hands of Timothy Omotoso, and also going far as saying that on the last night he went as far as saying that nothing of your life will happen, no good will come of your life because you don't listen. So that's how far we are this morning, and we're going to hear even later on her perhaps wrapping up her testimony of her ordeals that she allegedly happened as sexual offences under the hands of rape accused Timothy Omotoso and also his 2 co-accused.